let us talk about exploring new experiences of body that may emerge through space. We can talk about what are the characteristics of contemporary architectural expression and what will be the experience of being in such places. We need to explain the role of the body, which is at the origin of the experience and expression of space. How is the body intertwined with space? The body inhabits space. It is not in space. We understand the world, things, others, and oneself through our body. The body is at the origin of any signification. Now, the experience of the body is a source of expression of space. The expression of space, right? The experience of the body is a source of expression of space. How we experience the space is how we experience our body in space. This takes us to the notion of flesh. We have already discussed Merleau-Ponty's idea of flesh. Let's rethink the idea of flesh vis-a-vis the architecture, the body, and the outside. The body is a notion that holds a double meaning. It can be viewed and understood as an object, to have a body, and as a subject, to be the living body. An experience of the body should give us both at once. The experience of the body should give us both at once. However, the reflection of the body only gives us the thought of the body and not the experience of it. Not the experience of it. There were two perspectives on the body. The object and the subject are separated. The object and the subject are separated. That is why we have to put an emphasis on experience. That's exactly why we have to put an emphasis on experience. There is no other way to know the body than to live it in the whole, as a subject and object, both as a subject and object, as the one who is perceived and who perceives. As Merleau-Ponty would put it, I am my body. I am my body. And to live the body, it is also to live the space that the body inhabits. The flesh creates a common world on the basis of fundamental exchange of the perceptible between the world and the body. In other words, I draw my sense of the world to which I give a sense by perceiving it. I draw my sense of the world outside me to which I give a sense by perceiving it. So the sensible is directly connected to the intelligible. The sensible is directly connected to the intelligible. All ideas are given to us in the physical experience, through our physical experiences. There is no idea without the body, without the sensitive, without the sense. To perceive, it is exactly to make present something by means of the body. Flesh indicates at first the relation between the subject and the object, the subject and the world, the interiority expressing itself and the exteriority interiorizing. This is how it functions. The flesh of the body participates, very, very important. The flesh of the body participates on the flesh of the world. The flesh of the body participates on the flesh of the world. It's a participatory relation, not a passive relation of just being in the world. To walk in space, when we say we are walking in space, is also to walk at the same time within the self. You're walking, your gait is actually within your own self. The thought is, as the walking, which changes with the situation changes with the walking. The theory of relativity. The situation changes with the walking. So you see how your perception is also determining the world outside. Such is the nature of the relation between the space and the subject. In Merleau-Pontian phenomenology, when I see myself as others see me, when I see myself as others see me, I'm able to understand more about myself and about the other. For Merleau-Ponty, the supposed person or world dichotomy is just as artificial as the classical psychologist's mind-body dichotomy. The world is always already part of our bodily horizon and is perceived through intentionality or attention. Intentionality or attention as part of our phenomenal field. Human beings are through and through compounded of relations with the world. A person and his or her environment are entirely enmeshed. Entirely enmeshed. One does not make sense without the other. I am conscious of my body via the world. I'm conscious of the world through the medium of my body. I'm conscious of my body via the world, and I'm conscious of the world through the medium of my body. So think about this. When we talk about space, what we really talk about? We talk about the objects that exist in space. When we talk about existence, we talk about a kind of a spatio-temporal existence. To exist means to exist in time and space. So when we talk about, say, is space there? What is space? This question is almost like, what is a chair? An object. So an object and the space are related. Objects and space are related because you place an object in space. So what do we really understand as space? Like, I need some space between us. Leave some space between us. So this space means something which is a gap, which is not occupied by any object. Our common understanding of space is that there is no object in the space that we are referring to. That's why I say there is enough space, meaning that there are no objects occupying the space. It's not crowded, so to speak. But space can also be understood. Space can also be understood with the notion of it's allowing you to permeate it. You can move from A to B through space. Space is something that you can penetrate, right? You can move through. So this brings us to another fascinating idea, space and its relation to motion. Space and its relation to motion, speed, right? So because we cannot have motion if we can't validate space, because motion means you have a distance that you have covered. Motion from A to B, movement, dislocations, displacements, all these are related to our basic understanding of space. Now we look at this kind of relationship between the body and space from a point of view of the architecture, which is a realization of thought of space. Architecture is a realization of the thought of space. As I've already explained, the body is intertwined, interlaced with space. Therefore, the question is, what do we express exactly when creating architectures? What does architecture reflect exactly? Does it reflect the way we consider space or the way we consider ourselves? The question remains. Architecture is a reflection or a substitution of the self. Fascinating. Architecture is a reflection or a substitution for the self, a surrogate body. A surrogate body. To express space thus becomes to express oneself. To express space becomes to express oneself. To realize the image of the self. To realize the image of the self. To realize the image of the self by the means of space. By the means of space. This image of the self used to be recognizable, stable, and fixed. So was space that reflected stability too. But the image of the self has changed and become most fluctuating and unstable. Most fluctuating and unstable. But the image of the self has changed and had become fluctuating and unstable. Shall I say, fluid. The self exceeds its limits and goes out of his barriers by opening himself or herself to outside. The self exceeds its limit and goes out of its barriers by opening itself to the outside. Architecture and space have gone through the same evolution. Architecture and space, the self, have gone through same evolution towards more openings, towards more cuts, towards more openings, towards more cuts, towards more absences. Architecture is increasingly used as a tool to help people experience space as an open and variable dimension. Architecture is no longer considered as an object, but as a cognitive field, as an extension of our capacity to perceive, because an architecture is at the end of the day an expression of your own self. Now, interestingly, architecture is no longer considered as an object, but as a cognitive field, as an extension of our capacity to perceive. Actually, there are no borders anymore between the interior and the exterior. There are no fixed partitions. Architecture opens to the outside. What was the interior becomes the exterior. The inside of a body becomes its outside. The way we express space conditions the way we experience space. The acceleration of the world and the loss of space. The world, the body, and the identity spread and fall to pieces. This hybridization of identity and the world creates a hybrid space. If we create new hybrid, changeable, floating forms, there must have something happened with the body and our perception. Let us remind us of the words of Merleau-Ponty, who makes associations between the dislocation of the world and space and the dislocation of the body. Dislocation of the world and space and the dislocation of the body. Such is the vision of the world. Such is the vision of the world of today. We live in a world where everything accelerates. We live in a world where everything accelerates. Speed dominates. Since it has absolute power, speed also changes perception because it reduces the world as well as the body. The virtual world and the virtual body make the real world and the physical body disappear. Everything is a stream in constant liquefaction. We are experiencing an extreme liquidization of the world, of our language. We have entered a situation where everything becomes mediated, where all matter and space are fused with their representations in media. Media are not perceived as a comfort-creating service, but as a force that accelerates and destabilizes reality. Accelerates and destabilizes reality. To lose the direct relationship between the world and our body always pass through representation. This experience turns the body into a body machine. A body machine or a body prosthesis. A body prosthesis. This takes us to the question of liquid architecture. This takes us to this question of liquid architecture, the hybrid space. The hybrid space. The dissolution of borders occurs at different levels of our society. For instance, frontiers between the body and machine, interior and the exterior, virtual and real, tend to diminish thanks to innovation and technological progress. Nowadays, we live at the same time in both real and virtual space. Even the cities are organized according to both physical and virtual activities. Therefore, one can wonder how to join these two extremes, the real and the virtual. How to keep the identity of place and body in such a fluctuating world? How can beings keep their identity and at the same time be connected to the world, be everywhere? Stable identities as well as fixed spaces are no longer possible because they do not correspond to the reality of today's world. We should learn to think of both the local and the global, the subject and the object, the identity with its virtual specters. The liquid architecture reflects the fluidity of consciousness. It introduces the other modes of cognitions, the new plastic and visceral environment which synthesizes the action, the perception, and the vision. The floating environment serves as an interface between the public and the private. It is also a good illustration of the hybrid space which joins the opposites. By leaning on both physical, body, and virtuality, hybrid space proposes an approach to architecture that creates new cultural codes and disruptions within the physical and electronic networks that connect our international and local cultures.